They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What do people call you, Pete?
Mr. Joshua.
What's your name?
Schreck.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
Look, there comes one of them now.
Welcome to another agonizing edition of Schreck Talk. It's as painful for us as it is for you, unfortunately. Tonight we're talking about a subject that I'm pretty surprised we're talking about as a main subject, but it's kind of poignant considering that when this airs, it'll come out the day after it's released on Blu-ray. And we're talking about Series 8 of Doctor Who, the Capaldi's first season. I have a lot to say about this. I think my brother does as well. But let's get his thoughts on the initial thoughts before we go deep into it.
Yes, if you go back to our Terminator episode when we recorded that one, I did say that I was kind of stoked for Capaldi to become the 12th Doctor and that I was going to actually pay attention and watch his episodes and everything like that. So this is just coming, full circle. I've watched Series 8, and I got to say, I'm never going to be a Doctor Who fan. This is probably the best Who I've seen, but it doesn't do it for me. So we're going to go through the series, give our thoughts. This is going to be our main topic, so we're going to kind of go in depth. First time we've ever done a season like this. So why don't we start out with Mr. Joshua, if you start us out here?
Yeah, before I go into it, I'm hoping by the time we're done to have a good, clear understanding of why you don't like Doctor Who, and I think we will. So yeah, we'll start with the first episode, which is kind of... it was kind of meant to it's his first one. It's meant to be the jump starter, show off who he is and who he is as who his doctor's going to be. We're talking about Deep Breath, which was written by Stephen Moffat, who wrote a lot of these episodes. I can name a few of the ones he wrote because I make sure I know the ones he writes because I tend to not like them. But again, this is another example, I think, of them trying to do too much and putting style over substance, and creating this. They wanted to instantly make a landmark with who he was and make him separate from the previous Doctor. Well, at the same time, I felt the inclusion of Matt Smith in the episode really kind of ruins that point. It kind of, for me, takes away from the fact that it almost feels like they're having to validate who the new Doctor is when that's never been needed before.
Yeah, and I've decided, I've only watched 2 of them, but I've decided that I do not like regeneration stories, or not regeneration stories, but the first story of a new Doctor. I watched the one for David Tennant, very similar to this one. There's a lot of confusion, and the David Tennant one, he's kind of unconscious for a while. The companion doesn't know what to do. I think it's a tired story, and the focus of your show is Doctor Who. You need to focus on, he's the one, especially when you're bringing a new Doctor into it, you need to focus on the Doctor. Don't have him be, not know who he is, be confused the whole episode, or in, going back to the David Tennant one, completely unconscious for most of the episode. I think there's got to be a better way to do these regen stories.
And I'm going to actually disagree with you on that. I don't want to go too much into it, but the Christmas Invasion is actually one of my favorite Doctor Who, New Who episodes with David Tennant. I think it's definitely... the best of the after the post-regen stories, even though, because the important thing to understand about New Who is it's less about the Doctor, it's more about the companions. That was clear from the fact that the first person you meet is Rose, that she's the setup, she's your main character for the run of the show, and I think that's part of the driving force for the modern show is the companions and how they view the travels. But not to focus on it too much, so...
Well, let me just give another thought on that David Tennant story. The David Tennant part of that, where he's actually, stops the invasion or whatever, and he's being all, suave and sophisticated against those aliens or whatever in the Christmas Invasion, was great. The rest of the episode, terribly boring and uninteresting. And I kind of felt the same way about Deep Breath on this one. I just think that these stories, there's got to be a better way to do it. It starts out cool with a big old dinosaur walking around.
Well, I had a problem with that. That's, again, another time we're using a dinosaur for something, and it just felt cheap, and we're back in Victorian times.
I haven't watched as many episodes as you have, so I don't know the whole dinosaur cliche that they use.
Last season we had an episode called Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, so it was kind of... And again, we're back in Victorian times, which tends to be the spot we see. We have our group of Stracks and Jenny and Madame Vastra, our trio of sidekicks that thankfully this is the only time we're seeing. They are fun, but I feel they're getting a little overused. But we don't want to focus on that episode too much. We didn't like it. I think we can both agree that wasn't that great of an intro.
Yeah, it wasn't a good one, and I know you were worried about how the series was going to go.
I was very worried. I was very worried. They definitely did try and strike a chord with Capaldi. I just felt like it worked okay. It didn't. They didn't really reach what the character was going to be like. I think for a few episodes, even in the next episode, which a lot of fans seem to like, Into the Dalek. I was not a fan of this one particularly either.
I thought this is the worst Doctor Who episode I've ever seen. I absolutely hated this one.
Oh wow, I'm shocked. This isn't even my least favorite of the season.
Yeah, I thought this episode was terrible. The whole Doctor Who inside of a Dalek thing I thought was cheap and just completely weak. It's like they wanted to throw a Dalek episode in there, and I thought it was terrible.
Well, it was very obviously a tribute to the Fantastic Voyage, the miniaturization and putting into the Dalek. But yeah, I didn't really care for the way, they did. Again, they were trying to show how rough his character was, make him almost seem callous towards things with the way he's passing over people's deaths and things like that. It's good to see people. It was good again to see people finally dying again in Doctor Who. I'm happy to see that. Death is a big part of classic Who. It's a big part of. There's 2 episodes where all the entire guest cast dies, and you don't see that as often in New Who anymore. You got the Stephen Moffat everybody lives mentality, but into the Dalek, I think that was about one of the only things you get, is it is amping it up. They've tried using the good Dalek before, and even in New Who they did it in Dalek. In the classic Who they did it in the Evil of the Daleks, and I think this episode didn't do a good job. It felt forced. It felt like nothing. Like the believability of them inside this Dalek didn't seem real to me. In Fantastic Voyage, you believe the antibodies and things like that are actually attacking. Like, it seemed odd to me that all of
Dalek antibodies.
Yeah, the corridors
idiotic.
that everyone could walk around in, it felt stupid to me.
And after watching the first 2 episodes, I was just questioning my promise that I was going to watch this whole series, because those first 2 episodes weren't very good at all, and I didn't know how I was going to sit through another 10 or 11 or whatever.
I was preparing myself for another Moffat crap fest. I'll be honest at this point. We had seen Missy twice, so I was wondering how this was going to play into it as well. Seeing her character, which they were, that was obviously the main theme for the season. We'll get to that obviously a little later. Moving on to the next episode was the first one I actually enjoyed, even though Mark Gatiss wrote it. I actually knew that because I don't generally like his writing. It was The Robots of Sherwood. And the reason I liked this one was probably because it was just fun. Overall, there was, it was silly. It was nothing too dark. Robin Hood, the actor they got to play, was great. He was hilarious, I thought. I thought that including the picture of Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor, in it when he played Robin Hood was genius. I just thought it was fun. Clara was great in it. It was the first one where I felt hope for the season. Thoughts?
Yeah, and the only thing this episode had going for it was funny. There wasn't much else going on there. There was the ridiculousness with the arrow at the end.
Oh, we don't even want to get it. I don't think I can watch an episode of Who without having some moment where I'm like, wait, what? Did that really just happen? Like every episode, it seems like.
But it was a funny episode.
Yeah,
so it had me laugh quite a bit.
I finally started to enjoy the characters. I loved the banter between Robin and the Doctor when they were trapped and stuff like that. So all around, I thought it started to. I think it was the turning point for me when I started to feel like, okay, we have a chance here that this is going to be good. The next episode, Listen, is from what I've read on the line, is pretty popular among fans, and I think again I have to disagree with most of them. I didn't think it was that great.
Yeah, before I even found out that this was one of the most popular episodes from fans who've watched this series, I was talking to our commentator, Chorizo, last night, and she was talking about how terrible that episode was or how uninteresting it was, and I got to agree. They they did some stuff in there that I didn't really care about. I mean, it wasn't good. It wasn't bad. Definitely wasn't as bad as the first 2 episodes in the series. It wasn't as funny or as compelling as Robot of Sherwood. But it just really had not a whole lot going for it.
Yeah, and my thoughts on this episode are a couple of things. One, why do we have, leaving things unanswered is not okay. In some situations, it's meant to have that mystery, but again, they left too many things unanswered and it just seemed like they couldn't explain them. The knocking, the thing on the bed, things like that weren't explained. And beyond that, my major issue with it is not only last season we already established that Clara is the most important person in Doctor Who because the only reason the Doctor went on his adventure and made it safely into the right TARDIS, the only reason all of these things happen, he's been protected all these years in every one of his lifetimes by Clara.
Because of the Impossible Girl.
Because of the Impossible Girl. And now we even have to go and look at her even deeper into the mythology, making her far more equally. The Doctor would never have existed in so many ways without Clara, and that I don't know. That kind of bothers me. Again, I miss the days when it was just a fun person traveling with a companion, and a regular person traveling with the Doctor, having a good time, going on adventures. And that's what I got in the Robots of Sherwood. And then they get an episode like this that they increases the lore. But it feels like they're doing it just to try and pander to the fans, try and make, ooh, look what we just did. We just gave you this snippet of what the Doctor looked like as a child, ooh, or whatever. And I think that's my biggest issue with it. As a whole, there's the episode wasn't that fun, it wasn't that enjoyable, and they just left too many unanswered plot holes for me. So I can't buy into that like all the other fans.
Yeah. The next 2 episodes I kind of view equally, and that's Time Heist and The Caretaker. I don't know if you want to discuss those together, but I thought they were both okay episodes, but there was nothing special about either one of them.
I think this is going to be the main theme we're going to look at throughout our whole season. Is there was very little special. There was a lot of good, a lot of average, some bad, but very little great. There was some good. There's great moments, but again, like in Time Heist, the ending, the whole story is based on the chance that this, the idea that this girl's going to have remorse right on her deathbed. That's the whole basis for the entire story. I mean, and that to me just seems kind of flimsy. It was fun though. I did enjoy Time Heist. Caretaker also was fun. It was a little, it had a nice mix of serious and lighthearted. But yeah, they're both just. I mean, I had to practically when I was, going through and looking at each of the episodes, I had to almost look up and remember what happened in Caretaker. I could barely remember. There was so.
Yeah, and I had to read. I mean, for most of these episodes, I had to read what had happened in the episode. And Caretaker, nothing really stood out for me besides the scene where the Doctor thinks that Danny is not her boyfriend, but it's that other nerdy guy with the bow tie or whatever, that teacher.
Yeah.
And then the scene where Danny screws up the time thing and everything. Those are the only 2 scenes I remember from that episode.
Yeah, and the main thing I remember is the Doctor constantly referring to Danny as he's a PE teacher. Like, why do we constantly feel the need? It didn't even make sense in keeping with the Doctor's character. He's worked for UNIT before. He's technically on the payroll. He's been
Well, let's go into that a little bit later, because I want to discuss that a little bit more in depth.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next episode. Excuse me. Which I think we both were a little out of our normal sorts when we watched this episode. You might say.
Yes, I think we were both pretty drunk.
Yeah, I was pretty intoxicated. I'm surprised I actually finished the episode. Don't remember the finer details of it. I just remember the ridiculousness
I
of
was
the plot.
also playing a board game at the same time I watched this episode. So drinking and playing a board game while watching this episode.
Yeah, so you're really not too informed on that. We're not the best ones to talk about this, but it was fun. I remember enjoying the episode. I had lots of problems with the plot. Again, that's always a huge problem for me in Doctor Who. They ask me to buy into things that I just can't do. And I think that was the overall writing theme of the plot is, the moon would have been getting heavier a lot over a long period of time, not just all of a sudden. We would have known this was happening for like hundreds of years. That for me is the reason, without giving away the entire detail.
Well, it would have started out as a small, embryo, a small speck, and gotten.
Even without that, even if the shell was around it, it would have still gained the weight slow. Not so it wouldn't have all got grown all at once. Yeah. And that was
and I gotta say, this was my favorite episode of the series. Maybe it was because I was drinking. Maybe it was playing a board game and drinking and watching the episode. But I really enjoyed it. I thought there was some really bad science in there. Let's just be honest. There's a lot of bad science in Doctor, and that's one of the reasons I don't think I can ever get into it. But the idea of humanity having to decide what to do with their future, or what to do in this case, really kind of it felt like a very, very, very much a Star Trek episode. It had a lot of poignant stuff in it, and outside of the bad science fiction and stuff like that, I found that kind of refreshing, because I don't usually see that in Doctor Who. It's usually the same tired and worn stories, the same tired and worn kind of thought-provoking stuff. It's the same thing, and then just lots of big-eyed monsters chasing people around.
The biggest issue, I think, in regards to that is Doctor Who tends to preach a lot more than it tends to ask. And that, to me, is my biggest... where I see what you're saying. Instead of asking questions, it tries to answer questions, and I'd rather be asked the question and come to my own answer. But my biggest issue with this episode was honestly the fact that we reached our breaking point with Clara, that was discussed in the last episode, Caretaker, between her and Pink, when he really discovered about the relationship with the Doctor and her, and he said that there would come a point where he pushed her too far, and literally our next adventure, that point seems to happen. And at the end of the episode, she says she doesn't want to travel anymore with the Doctor, which leads us into the next episode, which happens to be my favorite episode of the season, which was the Mummy on the Orient Express. I think the title alone on this kind of got me. It's one of those titles that it's almost like they wrote the episode based around the title, like Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, as I mentioned earlier, Asylum of the Daleks,
like Snakes on a Plane.
Snakes on a Plane. They wrote the story around the title, and I think it's so fun. Like it's great to see you get a little more Clara gains a little understanding into the Doctor's perspective on how it comes, why he seems so callous about the way when he deals with death. The way this Doctor does, at least. We get to see Clara in an amazing flapper outfit, which was one of my highlights for the season.
Didn't she cut her hair right before this episode, and she's got a new hairdo in this one?
Well, I don't know if she's wearing a wig or if she actually has it. She has the bob, but I don't know if it's a wig.
I think it continues for the rest of the series, though.
I'd have to have when now that the Blu-ray is going to be out by the time this is on the air, I'll have to check that out and make sure I verify that, because I loved the look. Again, it was weird that it had something to do with military again. But I liked the episode. I thought it was fun. I thought it was meant to be. It had some serious moments to it, but it was meant to be what a good Doctor Who adventure was. At the end, the status quo had pretty much been returned to normal. The Clara decided that she was going to continue traveling with the Doctor, and it was just all around fun.
Yeah, and I watched this episode back to back with Kill the Moon or whatever. So if I was kind of, a little bit trashed in Kill the Moon, I was really trashed in this one. Still playing my board game, but it's one of those scary ones, like what was that one from earlier in the series, Listen, where they kind of, they're doing the kind of scary thing.
Doctor Who does try to tend,
there's usually one episode like that in the series. This
usually
one, there's two. It really didn't do a whole lot for me. It was a more fun episode.
Do you think maybe if you weren't so intoxicated, you might have enjoyed it more? Maybe you had gone past the point where it was fun?
No, because the drunker you get, the more fun things are. Even
unless you're
really
missing
bad.
the finer points.
Yeah. I didn't think it was that good. And I think this is the episode where I was like, why do they freaking talk so fast all the time? I don't understand it. It's like, spew out this thing as fast as you can, then this person spews out this thing as fast as they can, and it goes back and forth, this hyper fast banter constantly. And I think this is the episode where it just boiled under my skin.
I actually don't mind that at all. For starters, Clara, the actress who plays Clara, Jenna Louise Coleman, when she was hired at least, was hired because she could talk faster than Matt Smith. That was that's the reason they put out, is why she was hired. And two, I don't mind this because I love classics with like the detective story and Double Indemnity, where they're just talking a mile a minute, and if you're not paying attention, you're not going to hear what's going on. You have to actually consciously listen for every word, because otherwise you're going to miss it.
Yeah, and I just think it's this fast, upbeat thing. I love dialogue, but I don't love it when it's not given the proper respect it deserves, when it's just spouted out
in
as
Doctor
fast
Who,
as possible.
in Doctor Who, it tends to be his brain working really quick, so he's trying to problem solve and talk out loud. That generally tends to be when those moments happen.
But the classic Who didn't do that.
Not as much. It had happened once in a great while, but not exactly. It wasn't very common. And it's a difference, and maybe that's why one of the differences in the 45 minutes individual episode and this multiple 25-minute serial episodes. You got more time to expand on the story. But moving on to the next episode, which another one I thought was really kind of creative, pretty creative. It wasn't great. Again, there was nothing great about this season, but it was fun. It was an original idea. It was well executed, I thought, and that's Flatline, where there's a bunch of two-dimensional beings. Spoiler alert. Obviously, this whole season's been spoiled if you're listening to this. And I thought this one was a nice, unique idea. Its execution was just okay. It wasn't bad in any way. And I liked the fact that some of the characters that survived at the end you didn't like. Not always the characters that survive are the good ones, as they said in the Voyage of the Damned episode, I think it was called. I'm not sure. It was one of the Christmas specials with David Tennant. But yeah, not always the people who survive are the right people. And I liked that you saw that in this episode, that, one of the guys who survives was kind of a jerk. He was bad. He wasn't a great guy. And I just thought it was kind of fun, different angle. And it was good to see Clara being the Doctor,
Yeah, and the Doctor was really teeny tiny. I honestly don't have much to say about this episode. This was just another okay episode that I would put in the league with the Caretaker, and most of the other ones that were in this series. It was just an okay episode. There was nothing good, nothing great. The idea was okay, but I don't think the execution was that great.
Moving on to the next one, which is the episode I have almost nothing to say about, is In the Forest of the Night. Generally, I have an overall meh feeling about this episode. The only thing I really think of is the little girl waving her arms around, the little bug thingies. That kind of stands out in my memory. And, there's some good interaction between Pink and Clara. I feel like their characters' interactions feel natural. I really do. As amazing as that sounds, I feel like they do seem like the characters are growing and their relationship is expanding. Is much as hard to believe as that is, I believe it. I believe the characters do a good job.
I felt like this episode was M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong's The Happening in Doctor Who, with the plants and everything like that. It was a whole plant episode. The Earth is covered in a forest, so you can just kind of imagine how that happened and what's going on with that. The one thing I didn't like about the episode is I kind of picked what the ending was right from the beginning. As soon as the forest happened,
you knew it was there for good.
Yeah, I knew it was there for good, and I knew exactly what it was there for. So I kind of picked it up. I watched it just last night. Actually, I finished the last 3 episodes last night. There's really not a whole lot to say about it. Another average episode.
Yeah, and the ending really bothered me in this one too, with the magical return of the sister or whatever. Again, moving on.
Yeah, let's go to the last 2.
Darkwater. We had this.
Let's talk about these as a couple, because
they really let's talk about them individually and as a couple. First off, we've had Missy here for a whole season, building up. Thankfully, very underused, which I thought was a very
and
nice
I don't
highlight.
think the last few episodes
you didn't see her.
You didn't see her at all. You saw her in the first half of the season, and then they stopped putting her in there.
You saw her in the Forest of the Night at the end of Into the Forest of the Night, if I recall, or it was either that one or Flatline when she made a comment about Claire and how the Doctor chose right or whatever. But I think they did a good job of not overusing her, because when I first saw her in the first couple episodes, I was really annoyed with another season story arc that was going to be silly and pretentious. But it actually paid out pretty well. And by the time we hit Darkwater, I really felt this episode had a lot of good tension. The opening, from the beginning, it tries to grab you and tries to get you go for your heart. And I thought it was okay. The first part I thought was pretty good.
Darkwater was okay. I didn't mind it at all. It felt like the first part of a 2-parter, though. It didn't feel like it did anything new or inspired anything great in there or anything like that.
My favorite part, I would have to say, would be the homage to the invasion, which is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories overall. It's a second Doctor story where the Cybermen have been trying since their first appearance to land on Earth, to come to Earth. And they finally do, and there's these iconic scenes of them marching in front of some of these popular British buildings. And they recreated that pretty much for this, in front of them when they're coming out in front of the church and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that ending really gets you, I think. The reveal of who Missy is and all that. I thought the first episode, while you're right, it does feel like a first part. I think that's what it does best. It builds the tension. It sets up the second part amazingly. And the more I think about it, the more I actually enjoy the episode, even though it does have some flaws. I love the idea of 3M and or 3W.
3W.
I thought that was really cool. The way that worked out and everything like that. So I thought it really was a good first part and had me going. So
but I think the payoff was weak in the second episode.
Oh yes,
and
the
that's
second
why
episode was much of a letdown.
Death in Heaven.
Death in Heaven.
Death in Heaven was just. I mean, the payoff. I mean, I thought the Cybermen, who were like the Romulans of Doctor Who. If the Daleks are the Klingons, then the Cybermen are the Romulans.
I like your relation there. How you connect those. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, but that's pretty accurate. They're the number 2 villain.
Yeah,
they're the number 2.
They're
villain.
the number 2 villain. I thought they were way underused. Very crappily done. In this episode, they served no purpose whatsoever than just to be there.
And I didn't like them really being the toy of Missy. You know, that's something that I think we've seen it before, where they've been the toy. I think we saw it in the five Doctors, even in the special. So it's nothing creative to have the Doctor, the Master using the Cybermen to.
You just said who it was. We're gonna delete that part. Who you said who it was.
Why would we delete that? We already spoiled the rest of the season.
Well, we didn't really spoil it. But, okay, so Missy is the Master.
There you go. Missy is the Master. Sorry. Too bad. It's
When was
out
the last time the Master was shown?
The End of Time, David Tennant's last
okay,
episode.
So people
he never
knew
appeared.
Who fans who knew him, Master.
Yes, but he never appeared with the 11th Doctor. So it was good to have him back. It was good usage.
Have her back.
The actress they got.
I thought
she great.
She was fabulous. I thought she was the best part of that 2-parter.
Yeah, not since Anthony Anley or whatever his name was, who played the Master in the '80s, have I felt so evil. And
was that the guy with the
crazy
goatee?
Yeah, with the goatee. Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, I thought she did a fabulous job. She was cast perfectly for this role. She did a great job. I mean, like, best acting, bar none, I think, in the whole series.
Yeah, and I got to say, the final speech at the end, again, I think this was that part of what turned me off so much for this episode. It really felt like they were pushing an agenda down my throat.
And I kind of, so we've discussed all the episodes. We've got a few minutes more to talk about this. I didn't like the anti-military stance that I got from this series. From the very first time you meet, I don't even think it was probably in the first episode, but Danny Pink, I hated his character, and I especially hated all the military references with his character. I thought the Doctor and him both were slapping around the military like, like science fiction sometimes tends to do, especially liberal science fiction.
I got that, and at the same time I didn't, though. There were certain moments when I'd be watching it, even throughout every episode I would watch them, and I'd see moments where I felt they were trying to say that, but at the same time then they'd have other moments where they point out, the benefits and how good the military can be. But it seemed more like an attack on officers over the people who run the military than the military itself.
The Danny was obviously attacking the officers and the people who run the military, but I thought the Doctor was attacking the soldiers and those people of the military as well. So I thought it was an all-encompassing attack.
But then they had to make they made a point to show out that he was a soldier, basically. He was an officer. He was part of the military, and he was doing it himself. And I think that's why I got the idea that they weren't necessarily opposed to it, that these people do help, but it's a very taxing job. So I didn't get it as strongly as you, but I do see what you're saying. I think they actually, in their own way, were trying to make a point saying that the military is not for everyone, and it is a very demanding thing, and it reaps a lot of havoc on things. But I think they were trying to say something three-dimensional about it, not just attacking it. But overall,
one thing I want to also bring up here is, I heard some stuff after the first or second episode that the fans weren't really digging on Clara. I don't know if that's something left over from Series 7 with Matt Smith or just something in general that started this series, but they really weren't digging on Clara. How do you think, by the end of the series, what do you think about her character?
I hated Clara coming into the start. I felt like she really didn't have any depth to her. They definitely added some this season, but it was weird because it kind of felt like I was watching Clara Who at some points even, where they were trying to make it seem like she was more, again, focusing on the companion more than focusing on the Doctor. But I thought they definitely improved her character. That was one of the things I know some of the other fans I've talked to have enjoyed, is the way they made her more three-dimensional and not just this cookie-cutter impossible girl. She's now Clara Oswald, an actual real person. But again, I don't think there's anything special to say about her. I don't think there's. I would honestly say my highlight of the season is Capaldi. I think he really nailed the Doctor. His Doctor is extremely likable, in my opinion. Of the new,
well, and that's funny because I was gonna bring up the Doctor next. That I've heard a lot of great things about this Doctor and how much people love him. But when you think back, he's very similar to the most hated Doctor of them all, Colin Baker, the Sixth Doctor.
Fun fact about that, Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor never got, whereas we've already started to see the softening of the character of the 12th Doctor, of Capaldi's Doctor. Colin Baker never got that chance, which was the original idea for his character, to start off with this really abrasive, harsh character and slowly show that he is a good person inside, even though he sometimes has to make hard decisions. And I think they did a better job by making that a much quicker change, one series change, where we got to finally see it. That way people could warm to him over the course of a series instead of making it something that lasted years that they never actually got to do. So I really thought he was good. How did you feel about him?
I like the Capaldi character. In fact, I've only seen 2 Doctors complete. Chris Eccleston, Celestian Chris, the 9th Doctor, and then Peter Capaldi. I watched this series here, so I've seen his complete things so far. I've watched the first part of the first series of David Tennant. I've watched some Matt Smith. I've watched a lot of other Doctors, the older ones, with Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, my boy. I've watched parts of them, and I think, honestly, Capaldi's probably my favorite Doctor so far.
I really like Capaldi. I would say of the new Who Doctors, he's arguably my best. I would say this series was my second favorite of New Who, behind the Donna series, Series 4. And the only reason I'm having a hard time is choosing his character more is because he had so many lackluster episodes. At least Tennant had some great ones. So it's really hard for me to pick out of my New Who Doctors which one I like. Obviously, I'm not going to put him above my Pertwee or my Troughton. Those are my boys. And I really liked him. I'm glad that fans seem to be picking up on him. I know that some of the episodes had some really good ratings. Some of them had some pretty bad ratings. Some of the worst ratings Doctor Who's had since it came back. If I remember right, Flatline. When I was researching it, found out it was like the 3rd lowest watched Doctor Who episode since it's returned. I really hope that people continue to embrace it. We'll see the Christmas special that they brought up looks really exciting.
And I'm going to watch it just because of Nick Frost.
Yeah, I was really excited to see him. So I think that's pretty much, we covered everything on the season. Any final thoughts on the series?
I probably will not watch every episode of Series 9. I may do it. I don't know. He is my favorite Doctor, but like I said in the beginning, just Doctor Who doesn't do it for me. There's so many problems I have with it.
So maybe next season you'll let me screen them for you ahead of time and recommend the good ones.
Sure.
There you go. I think it was good to see the show come back. For my final thoughts would be, it was good to see the show come back to something that I really liked and could feel going a chance on every episode. Whereas in the last couple of years of the Matt Smith era, pretty much when I rewatch my Matt Smith era, it's really hard for me because the episodes just, again, don't stand out, and that's the biggest problem with this one. So I hope it ages well. I hope the next series continues the uptrend, and hopefully, we won't have to wait we'll probably have to wait till next October for the next one. So we'll see if we're still doing this. Maybe I can review the next one whenever we're finished with it. So that's going to finish up our thoughts.
All right, now Mr. Joshua, you got to take it away with us on Mr. Joshua's Tea Time.
Tea time. Tea time.
And I'm here with Tea Time. Since we're talking about things that came out on Blu-ray on December 9th, another thing that comes out on Blu-ray on December 9th would be Guardians of the Galaxy. And my favorite part of Guardians of the Galaxy, the main reason I was super excited at first and wanted to see it was because one of my favorite actresses, Karen Gillan, happens to be in the movie in a nice villainous role that I was really excited to see her in. So tonight on my Tea Time, I'm going to talk a little bit about 9 reasons why I love Karen Gillan. Before I go into that, let me give you my tea this week is going to be a Celestial Seasonings Earl Grey because I like Earl Grey, as you've obviously learned if you've listened to these before. Before I get into my 9 reasons, I know you're not particularly a fan of Karen Gillan, so let's hear what you have to say.
She's a terrible actress. I think the only reason you like her is because she's a Scottish redhead. She did get you into Doctor Who, but then you realize that she's a terrible companion. Her character was terrible, but I really do not like Karen Gillan and all the Karen Gillan stuff that we've got.
Yeah, get it right. It's Gillan, not Gillian.
All the Carrie Gillan stuff
Gillan
that's in our Star Who room just exacerbates my dislike even more.
Well, we'll start with, you already named my reason. We'll start with that one first as the first reason, which is Doctor Who. She was the reason I started watching Doctor Who. I remember seeing, she wasn't the first, I didn't start watching with Matt Smith, even though I could have. But when I saw her, the ads for her, I was like, who's that? And it got me interested to watching it. And then it took me only about a couple months to get to the point where I was at the Matt Smith episodes, about a month or so. And unfortunately, I didn't really care for her character, Amy Pond, one of my least favorite of the new Who companions, unfortunately. I think her acting is just okay in Doctor Who, nothing special. But yeah, that would be my first reason, just because it was the first introduction I had to her. I wouldn't say it's my number one reason. These aren't really ordered, except for the last one. But that was the first thing. Another reason, since we're talking about shows, the recently canceled show Selfie, which I really surprisingly started to like. I was pretty shocked when I saw the ads. I said I would watch it because, one, I'm a big fan of Karen Gillan. Two, I'm a big fan of Audrey Hepburn, and this is a reimagining of My Fair Lady. And I really actually grew to like the show, and I was pretty disappointed when it got canceled. I know you didn't care.
I was pretty disappointed when I saw it. But what's your next reason?
My next reason, actually kind of an extension of that, her talent. You say she's a horrible actress. Selfie's actually the first point where I really noticed that she did have a great talent. She's actually sings a song. There's some dancing she does in some of the episodes, and I think her acting is hilarious. It's amazing. She's got great comedic timing, and so I think her talent really stood out to me for the first time, at least, with Selfie. So that's my next reason. After that, I would have to pick another thing you mentioned, bringing it home for the gingers. Us redheads need somebody representing us, and we don't really have too many people out there doing that for us. And it's great to have somebody out there in the forefront, almost an A-lister, getting close to being an A-lister at least. Still sitting in B, I would say, like most actors do. But she's getting close to bringing us up to the forefront, and there's not too many. I can't name any other gingers. Eric Stoltz hasn't been popular since the 80s.
Well, yeah, but being a ginger, she still has no soul. What's your next one?
Next, I have to talk about those legs that go all the way up. I mean, I don't think I need to say anything more than those things. I mean, there's even references in other Doctor Who episodes where I think there's an episode where Clara sees a picture of her and comments that woman is all legs, and that's the truth. I think she's like 5'11", 5'10", or something like that, and most of that is legs.
She's like a redheaded Barbie doll.
The next one, speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, I mean, and since I mentioned legs, who else could make a bald, half cyborg, purple, evil chick awesome and sexy and beautiful? Like, I was in love with her the second she stepped on screen. That's just not and I thought when I saw her with her head shaved normal, she was unattractive. But when I saw her in the costume and as the character, I was sold for sure. And I know you haven't seen it yet. You're gonna be seeing it shortly.
Yeah, I'll be seeing it
by the time this airs. You'll have seen it. So that's my next one. Another thing you mentioned is my collection of Karen Gillan memorabilia in our Star Who room. I also have my picture from when I met her at a con. And that's another thing. I mean, she's very much a genre girl. She plays up to the sci-fi horror fans. She's been in a horror movie now, Oculus. So she's definitely sticking with her roots and realizing, while still expanding outside of it, but realizing that those people are going to be there for her 20, 30 years from now. And so she pays attention to them and is very faithful to her fans. The next reason I have is that my reason number 8 is her accent. Now, I know you're not a fan of this, but I don't think that's her accent. I think you just don't like her voice.
Yeah, she's got a very manly voice. And being a man, I don't like to hear manly voices. I like to hear, kind of feminine. In fact, I like Bernadette from Big Bang Theory, that really high-pitched voice. I like that. I like to hear that in my women. Not something deep like she has. It's not the accent that doesn't do it for me. It's the actual voice.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because it's studies show that men generally like a more sultry, deeper voice. Hence why characters like Jessica Rabbit were voiced by someone like Kathleen Turner with a more deep voice. But the accent, Scottish. I mean, I don't need to say anything more. Even though it's not the greatest Scottish accent, it's pretty awesome. And my number one reason that I love Karen Gillan is just her personality, the goofiness she has. She comes off as very natural and so likable. I mean, when you watch interviews with her, when you read things with her, it's completely unbelievable that this is a persona, that she's not being genuine with how she is. And every time I see her, I think the word adorkable has been used. I've used it multiple times to describe her.
So is that going to be it for your Karen Gillan?
Yeah, I mean, it's Karen Gillan. Get it right.
That's what I said.
All right. Gillan. We're going to get it right. Eventually, you're going to have it right. So, yeah, that's my thought on it. If you don't love her, well, you're wrong. That's all there is to it. So let's go ahead and move over to Schreck and see what's going on in his swamp this week.
What are you doing in my swamp?
And welcome to Schreck Swamp this week. I've kind of determined, after seeing some of our views and stuff like that people really aren't turning in. I hope you are. And for those of you that are, great. But, this is just kind of a forum for us to do what we want to do. So I'm going to go to something you probably don't care about, maybe aren't interested in, but it's very kind of compelling to me. And we're going to kind of go into the history realm. I'm a big history buff. I know you are, Mr. Joshua.
Oh, yeah. When I wanted to be a history teacher when I was younger, and unfortunately just didn't pan out.
All right, so what I'm going to be discussing now is a topic that I really enjoy, and that's going to be Jack the Ripper.
Is that the movie that From Hell is based on?
Yes, and that's actually the movie. I mean, the movie's not very good, especially when you know about Ripper lore and stuff like that. It's not very good at all. It's completely fabricated. Nobody puts any credence in that story. But it did get me thinking about it and got me interested in it, and I went and researched all about Jack the Ripper. What do you know? I know you're into serial killers and stuff like that. What do you know, or do you care about Jack the Ripper?
I know a few of the basic facts your average person would, well, probably not your average person, but your average history person might know, which is that it happened in, I believe, the 1890s or the 1880s.
It happened in between August and November of 1888.
And it was in London, obviously, and there was 5 murders that are considered confirmed. There's the infamous sending of the liver, I believe it was the liver, and a few other minor details where it happened, Whitechapel and stuff. Since you made me stop by and get a picture there just for you. That's how big a fan you are. Let me mention that first. When I was in London, the only thing my brother asked me for was to get a picture in Whitechapel because of its
Whitechapel is the district of London where the murders took place in 1888.
Yeah, so that was the only thing he asked me for, was to get a picture in Whitechapel that said something about Whitechapel, because that's how important this subject is to him.
Yeah, I'm a real big fan of the Jack the Ripper lore, and let me just kind of give you an idea of what it is. So they've never figured out who Jack the Ripper was. They've got there's a cast of hundreds of possible suspects, but they never figured out who he was, and they never figure out how many people he killed. The general consensus is it's called the canonical 5. There's 5 victims that they are reasonably sure are Jack the Ripper victims. There's others before and after that are possibles, but there's 5 of them that they are sure of. The first murder happened on August 31st. It was Mary Ann Nichols. The second one happened about a week or so later. Annie Chapman on the 8th of September. Then there was actually a double event where there was 2 murders that happened in one single night. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes on the 30th of September, and then the last one didn't happen for over a month later. On the 9th of November was Mary Jane Kelly. So
I've seen that picture of Mary Jane Kelly.
That is sickening and disturbing. The reason, though, that they kind of find that these are the 5 ones is because of the way that they were killed, the area that they were killed. They got progressively worse, with the exception of Elizabeth Stride, who on the night of the double event, what they think happened is he killed the first one, got caught in the middle of doing his thing, and then his hunger wasn't satiated, and he went and killed another one that same night. But with the exception of that, the killings got progressively worse. They were obviously done with a knife and various dismemberment and body parts removed. And when you get to the final killing, Mary Jane Kelly, it was just complete and utter brutality.
She wasn't even recognizable practically as a human being at the end of the picture I seen.
Yeah, it's really disturbing. But then what makes it really interesting and compelling is the murders just stopped. Like, they started in the end of August, and then they just stopped again on the 9th of November, and nobody knows who the killer was, what happened. There was lots of letters sent. Jack the Ripper actually gets his name from a letter sent, a couple of letters sent to the newspapers and stuff where he claims his name as Jack the Ripper.
That's when he sent like a liver, wasn't it?
No. Those letters are they're similar in style, but they've kind of been disproven as actually coming from the killer. There was a third letter, though, the From Hell letter, which is where the comic book, which eventually became the movie with Johnny Depp and Heather Graham, got its name from. And that's where they actually sent, I think it was a kidney, the left kidney. And the coroner did prove that it was a left kidney and that it was a human kidney. So, I mean, but there's no kind of definitive proof. The only thing that you know about Jack the Ripper is that the only thing you know, period, is that there was 5 victims that died a certain way, and that's all you know. You don't know who it was. You don't know if it was one person, if it was multiples, and that's what I think makes the Jack the Ripper story so compelling.
Well, now, why do people call him the first modern serial killer? I mean, I've heard that the title before, but I don't know why it is.
Yeah, and the reason why he's called the first modern serial killers were around before then, and a lot of people refer to him as the first serial killer. But he's not really the first serial killer. What it was the newspaper industry had gotten a lot bigger at this point, and the journalists it was cheaper for everybody to buy a newspaper at this point because of the printing presses and everything like that. So the information was readily disseminated out to the public. So they all got the idea, it was like half a penny or half a pence or something like that, where you could buy the newspaper articles and get all this information, and the journalists were putting all kinds of stuff out there. So it was very much in public view, and that's what really made him so famous at that time.
So it's kind of like the mainstream media, the way we overinflate situations to make them worse, and gets the public hyped up, makes them think that all these, horrible things are going to happen to them, and gets them, what's the word I'm looking for, incensed? I think that's the word, where they're going crazy.
Yeah, pretty much. And this started with Jack the Ripper, and that's why he's called the first serial killer, and I think that's why I think the reason he's endured, though, is because of the mystery. Who is he? There's a list of hundreds of people. There's Robert Mann, William Sickert, Montague. There's stories, like I said, from Hell, where they talk about it was part of the English royalty. There's so many lists of subjects, and there's always problems with each and every one of them, and we're never going to know. People claim throughout the last 130 years that it's been going on that they know who the killer is. They're sure. But nobody is going to know, and nobody will ever know.
Yeah, I think people really like a good mystery. You can see this with some other famous historical murders or killers. The Green River Killer, before he was discovered but to be Gary Ridgway, a lot of people were fascinated by that story, how he went for so long and then just stopped as well, which is pretty uncommon for serial killers. You have the Black Dahlia murder, which was just an individual murder, a single murder that was just so horrific in what had happened and the way it was done that it stood out, and we've had movies and things like that. And the Cleveland Torso, I think people just like the good mystery about it, and it's kind of weird that people are so fascinated by something that's so horrifying and so grotesque. But I mean, that's kind of in our nature. We like to be scared, even though we obviously don't want these horrible things to happen. We're fascinated by them.
Yeah, and what's really gotten me is the mystery. The same thing as everybody. I don't know if I want to know who the killer is, but I have a fun time figuring it out. And that's what really just drives that home with me, and what makes me such a big fan of Ripper lore.
So, final thought, do you think in 100 years it's been over 100 years, you think 100 years from now we'll still be talking about Jack the Ripper?
I think people will still be trying to figure out who Jack the Ripper is.
Oh, there you go. I think it's a fascinating subject, and glad we could talk about it for a minute. So let's go ahead and move on to our final countdown.
It's the final countdown.
All right, so we're going to be continuing on with this whole history thing, and the top 5 countdown that I've come up with for this week is going to be top 5 battles. Now, these are military engagements throughout the course of human history that we know about, that we're interested in, that have really kind of suck us in and make us want to know more. Do you have any thoughts on top 5 battles?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting subject for some people because it's something that it's hard to define what's a battle necessarily, a skirmish or a large conflict. But for the most part, I had a fun time trying to think of the ones that I was fascinated with throughout history and picking exactly what I would want with these out of these episodes. I think these battles. Some of them are modern and take using modern warfare, using guns, things like that, aircraft. Some of them are classic. A lot of battles happened when it was just archers and swords and stuff like that. Swords and sorcery without the sorcery. And I had a great time actually trying to think about these because there's so many of them.
Yeah, and I found that the majority of mine are actually, they're all modern, semi-modern battles, modern battles with the exception of one. And I just think that there's more information out there for those battles. I really wanted to try and put something in there from the classical era, the Battle of Thermopylae or, the Battle of Hastings, something like that. But there's not enough information out there to suck me into that story.
And unfortunately, I didn't have as much. It's hard to do that. Yes, there's so many great battles, but again, it's much easier when you can have footage from it, when you can have written accounts of the soldiers that were there and things like that from the more modern ones. So it definitely makes it a little easier to draw off those ones.
All right, so let's begin. Give me your number 5.
Since you mentioned classic ones, the only one that I guess will be in our list if you didn't include any would be the Battle of Marathon, which I put as my number 5, which is most people only remember it because of the gentleman running at the end of it.
The marathon is where the marathon got its name. It's 13.1 miles from Marathon to wherever they were going.
Yeah, to run there and back.
And then back to kind of pass on the information. So my number 5 is going to be a Civil War battle, the Battle of Fredericksburg. It's kind of like a precursor to my number 1, but it's a very interesting, entertaining, thought-provoking battle that, as far as my Civil War buff love goes, I'm really into.
I'm shocked you have a Civil War battle in your list there. My number 4 is one I'm not too familiar with, but I put it in there because of how important it is and how landmark of an event it was. And no, I'm not talking about Waterloo. I'm talking about Stalingrad, which pretty much stopped the German Eastern offensive, which pretty much changed the course of the war, on the Western Front at least. So I had to pick it.
Alrighty, so my number 4 is going to be also very similar to yours. Is going to be the Battle of Kursk, the largest armored battle in history. Took place in World War II between the Germans and the Soviet Union. You can't get any bigger tank battle than that in history.
My number 3, kind of something I'm surprised I have in here when I was thinking about them, is the Battle of First Bull Run, or also the First Manassas, depending on which side of the war.
Which side of the Mason-Dixon line you're on.
Which was the inaugural battle of the Civil War. And the North, even though I'm, unlike you, I'm a Northerner, I think it's kind of amazing how confident and cocky they went in and how badly they got walloped.
Alrighty, that's good. I love Civil War battles. My number 3 is going to be the Battle of Trenton. This one you probably know about, but you don't know what it's called. The shot of George Washington crossing the Delaware, kind of looking out. That's where this comes from. This was a huge turning point in the war. The George Washington made a huge gamble, and it paid off. And at a moment when the United States, the rebels from the Americas, were at their lowest, George Washington stepped it up, and I think it's partly responsible for the United States.
I would agree. My number 2 is one I actually fell in love with due to the film version of it, which is the Battle of Midway. It took place in World War II in the Pacific, and it really, I think, decided the fate of it's like one of those things. Like if Pearl Harbor, they had just done one more round, they would have crippled us. It's one of those things where if we hadn't won this battle, who knows the outcome of the war? It was basically we decimated their fleet.
Yeah, and I think the Japanese Navy hadn't lost a battle in like 300 years or something like that. That was the first time that they had.
So that's my number 2, and that's why it was because it was also so decisive and a great movie.
Yeah, and my number 2, going back to World War II as well, the invasion of Normandy, also known as D-Day. This was, it wasn't a foregone conclusion. We look at it now about how big and massive it was. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that we were going to win. But we did. We took Europe, and from then it was just basically taking, mile by mile until we got to Germany.
Score 1 for Operation Overlord. And my number 1 is kind of a smaller battle. Most people wouldn't know it, but I'm a huge World War I buff. I think it was called the Great War. It's kind of forgotten because it was so much trench warfare, so much literally loss of life, but we really developed the modern warfare here. World War II was, set up because of all this. We learned tanks, planes. They first started to have things like this. And Somme just happens to be my personal favorite battle from World War I. Has a huge British casualty loss, and just showed us how to make bad decisions in war.
Alrighty, and my number 1, this was a foregone conclusion when I came up with this idea, the Battle of Gettysburg. You've already mentioned how big of a Civil War buff I am. This is the battle. If you want to think about, when you rate a battle, you think about size. Okay, this battle was huge. 250,000 people fighting it out. It's not as big as like Normandy or something like that, but it's the largest battle on the Western Hemisphere. If you think about importance, I think if the Union would have lost this battle, we would have 2 countries right now, the Confederate States of America and the United States of America. And then the battle had character. The stories and the people who are involved in it are immortal, and they're going to, as far as this battle goes, and they're going to be remembered in history for what happened these 3 days in July 1863.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a good war film and how to make them a really good representation of what happened. That's a perfect example.
Talk to
right
Ted
there.
Turner and the movie Gettysburg. So that's going to be it for our Doctor Who Series 8 episode here. Next week we're going to be discussing Call of Duty, going into the X-Men comic books, The Age of Apocalypse, and we're also going to be listing our top 5 Star Wars characters. So hopefully you'll come and check us out then.
Go away or I shall taunt you a second time.